Chairman Cruz, thank you. Thank you to you and Senator Sinema for having this hearing. The panel is knowledgeable and experienced and articulate. It's nice to see that even in the United States Senate that exists. Let me start with this issue of the Stability Act, S-762. Senator Sinema, thank you for your co-leadership on this bill. I find no one among my colleagues who is opposed to this legislation. And is that true of the panelists today?
Yes.
Yes.
So the only argument that is said to speak against it, and it comes from some of my colleagues on the Appropriations Committee, is that if we eliminate the risk of difficulties at air traffic control within the FAA, that we increase the chances of a shutdown. So it's I don't know whether that's a practical matter. The argument is we'll just see more shutdowns if there's not a consequence. I would hope that we could do our jobs better than we've done them to date, and I hope that it doesn't take a disaster, the difficulty, challenges in the air system for us to avoid doing something that makes no sense in the first place. So I'm curious if you have heard if anybody has any other explanations for why someone would not be in favor of this. And then I would ask you if you would help me, and I assume that you've been working to see that there are additional co-sponsors to this legislation, and if you're receiving any pushback from my colleagues that I should know about. Anybody have any advice how we advance this bill and further than where we have today? All right, I'm on my own. It's you and I, Senator Sinema.
Can I say one thing?
Yes, ma'am.
What I'd like not to see is another shutdown to convince people to sign on to this legislation. Let's get in front of it. So
I share that sentiment. It's why I introduced the bill.
Thank you.
And we ought to be able to work through our challenges, not requiring a disaster, a catastrophe, or even just difficulties for American traveling public to get us to do our work. And Mr. Boland?
Well, I would just say, Senator, that your explanation on why not to pass your bill is an only in Washington explanation. Everywhere else, people know our economy, our safety depends on a strong and robust air transportation system. And I think not only do the people at this table support what you're trying to do, I think the American public does as well.
Well, knowing that you're from Kansas, I take your words with great weight because you're telling me that Kansans must think that way. And fortunately, in this instance, I certainly share that view. Mr. Boland, I appreciate what the chairman had to say in his opening comments. I know that your membership strongly opposed privatization during the debate leading up to the passage of the FAA reauthorization bill. But what are the priorities of business aviation community in advancing modernization? You talked about the difference between modernization and privatization. What are the things that stand in the way of modernization? Is there a legislative request here, or is this just about implementation, or is it just take us back to don't shut down government because it slows down the process that's well on its way?
Our air transportation system, the next gen that we talk about, is not just a technology program. It's not just about policies. It's not just about procedures. It's all of those things. We need policies, procedures, technologies, but we also need community support and industry buy-in. One of the things that Chairman Cruz mentioned was the concern for noise. I think as an example of how we modernize, there are examples where we didn't probably get as much community involvement in a lot of what we were trying to do. We took flight paths that were very dispersed. We concentrated them, which made them very efficient, but it also concentrated some noise. We're now working on ways to do predicted intentional disbursement. Those are areas where we need to come together. Like anything else, having a clear defined goal is very important. Having accountability, measurability is all very important. I think what we have seen is over time we've begun with the Next Gen Advisory Committee to find that forum. What we are missing is some of the oversight has not necessarily been potentially as strong as we've had other political distractions. Now that we have a 5-year bill and we've got a lot of stability, we can certainly do that. Public engagement is something that we are working on, and I think we'll do better in the future. So I think, you know, a lot of this is very hard grassroots blocking and tackling stuff. We've got to go to communities. We've got to get community buy-in. We've got to get industry consensus. We need to have goals, accountability. We've got to have oversight. I think we now have an opportunity to do that with the political distractions put to the side.
Mr. Chairman, if you'd let me put a couple questions into the record, or you all can respond to me and just personally if you'd like. First of all, I thank Ms. Pinkerton for A4A's interest in working together in the absence of privatization to find solutions to the challenges that we face. Mr. Baker, I would ask you if you would either in person or on the record outline for me the things, tell me what the top 5 things I ought to be worried about for general aviation in rural America. I'm often thought of as a member of Congress who cares about aviation because we manufacture lots of planes. That's certainly true. But I care a lot about aviation because we have lots of rural communities, private pilots who are able to connect with the rest of the world and keep rural America alive. And I'd welcome knowing what I should be most attentive to. And Captain DePete, I'd be interested in kind of the question that I asked Mr. Boland, ways to modernize ATC operations in the absence of separating it, the air traffic control, from the FAA. Mr. Chairman, thank you.